Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for attending this session. Alessandro Petroni, I'm Director of Strategy and Solution for the financial service industry at Red Hat. I've been working in the industry for 17 years at banks, having fun and having way much more fun at Red Hat. And still working with you as a partner. I love it. So we're going to talk about platforming, open source platforming, and specifically to see how we can use these open source platforms for the banking industry, where we do have some specific requirements to apply and some direction that we want to go into the banking sector. So this is the agenda I'd like to address with you, a journey, understanding what we are driven in financial services. I kind of feel a little strange to talk to you, the bankers, the IT, you know way more than me. But I've been there with you along, so it's a journey, and there are some views I would like to share with you. And talking about the path of evolution or the parallel path, we do believe there are ways to improve. There are not just technologies, also people, processes, and everything really needs to be tied together to go into the next gen of financial services. How do we get there? Standardization is a great key, and open source is the place where standardization gets formed, evolves, and also where we are striving to get into the next stage. And is that open source a way to solve problems? Maybe. Let's see, let's go and deep dive what does it mean, and also what is for me as a technologist, as a banker, as a business guy, and as an end consumer. It's really something that we want to latch on, we want to rely on. And the rely on is important because we want to understand also how safe it is to use open source for financial services and also for general mission critical operation beyond financial services. And if we are opting to embrace open source, do we have the right elements? What are the needs and the must-haves in order to safely run mission critical operation on open source? So, if I would summarize what is our reading of financial services, I would say definitely the need to do a much better job into helping our end consumers, the customers. Probably they prefer nowadays a Facebook interface, an Instagram, a Slack, or a WhatsApp. Is the bank up to par to really engage with the end customer with easy of use and mobility as a Facebook is? We are not there yet. That is actually our dream. To be easily consumable as becoming your financial buddy, rather than the place where I need to go to the ATM, which is 3 miles away, and I can find the parking lot, pay. I want cash now. Can be card, it can be digital cash. Those are the problem of the present. We are regulated. Financial services, of course, is important. Stability is also economy. Can we move innovation and still be compliant, transparent, as the regulator wants, and also as we do want as banking, because we need to operate in a certain way. And of course, banking is money. We want to stay monetize more and more and continuously be pressured, be regulation, and also the need to improve in our way to operate. We have a struggle into how to monetize right away to keep the economy flowing. And of course, we now entering the new era of banking and the digital world. Are we able to compete digitally among ourselves as banks? But more important, can we offer what the customer wants in terms of experience? So the response to these drivers from the IT and banking cycle definitely is to work on developing much more elegant user experience and interface to the end user. From the other point of view is how to get there into our processes. Really, the input is to change the way we work with agility and ending into what we talk a little more into what I feel is the goal, is the objective, is in the continuous evolution, continuous innovation dream, maybe. And then, of course, while we're doing so, we also want to lower the operational cost. There is still a lot of cost, a lot of complexity in the bank. There are gazillion million processes that are way not optimized. Can we, while we're introducing new technology, new processes, also lower the need to do manually a lot of stuff that we do nowadays? So, transformation toward a better way to operate and to serve customers is a journey that has dimensions. It's not just technology, it's not just the cloud, there are elements. And I would summarize in three major elements. One is definitely the need to recombine the capability in the banking sector in terms of application for the end user or for the associate with new architecture. Way more flexible, highly scalable, reusable, reducing the 10,000 plus application types in the bank into maybe less with a very thorough enterprise architecture. This is all about next-gen architecture for banking. And definitely it's clear that maybe running the data center only is probably not the way to go, especially if you think you're a bank and should be focusing on financial service offering and how to serve the customers. But I still need to operate these very expensive data centers with co-location and a lot of redundancy. Whereas there are opportunities to use infrastructure with public cloud, it's definitely very appealing to take a look at the reduction of cost that the cloud providers can offer. Is that possible to use public cloud? This is the big debate across every bank. Every day we discuss about, can I go here, can I go there, in terms of the providers. And then it's people, which is all about people all the time. How we drive the change, how we collaborate among each other. So double clicking here in this evolution in the three major streams, I want to highlight a little more with kind of a little sequence here. And as we started initially having applications that were monolithical, mainframe-centric, green screen, we also have been working on projects, looking at the requirement set, spending a lot of money understanding what needs to be done, and then we're going to be delivering this and testing and putting it in production. 18 months, 2 years is actually an average project length. 6 months maybe if you're really smart, but it's not enough for the speed that your customer wants to see the new capability and the new way to consume financial service offering as any other thing in life, like autonomous car or maybe entertainment and media, which evolves much faster. And then the technology side and the application infrastructure, huge cost of hardware, beefed up hardware, very powerful servers, mainframes. That is hopefully the past, but we still have running these computers in our data center in the bank. And now moving toward more, can we host somewhere else? Maybe there is a service provider we can use to lower our cost of ownership for data centers. Can we also think more in an agile way, the way we think to manage our project for the delivery? So agility, big momentum, is probably up and running and happening in every organization. And of course, from the point of view of the evolution, now we are going into understanding that probably can an element of business capability that can be dealt more granularly than the big cuts or the big solution that we buy sometimes from vendors. We want to really re-architect everything so we have one point where the responsibility for one business function is there only, and there is then orchestrated with any other business function in terms of microservices. Microservices, probably a term, is used, overused, abused, it's fine. You have your own pick for microservices, but it's actually having the place where one business function in banking is processed, the authority, the responsibility is there, and if you need to deal in a business process, whatever is the journey, could be a loan origination, could be opening a bank account, that particular function is there. That microservice owns it and can be also reused across the journey of any business process, kind of the orientation of microservices. And why is interesting microservices? Because with the evolution of the technology and the architecture, microservices and element of architecture, which I would mean containerizing them, is kind of what we see. That we are kind of sensitive in this container world, of course, because we see as the way to create a new marketplace for capabilities. It's standardization of packaging, standardization of delivery of the supply chain between fintech, ISVs, provider, global system integrator. They know how to handle this new way to contain a business function, to manage, to deploy, to scale it, all standardized. If you think standardization in other world, take containers in the real world, shipping, we have been able to lower the cost of transportation by the means of defining two standard containers format, 20 and 40 feet, nothing else. Everything else is bulk, which is more expensive. And the way we went to do so, it took probably 40, 50 years to build all the ports and all the cranes and all the system, the chassis that is parallel to what is happening now. We decided that standardization was the key to lower transportation costs. And eventually, in the infrastructure, now that we have this element, there is an opportunity now to use really clouds or every kind of cloud. And we'll touch base more on what cloud. So I mentioned containers as a keyword, but containers, it becomes really this new way of wrapping the goods in a standard way, where inside we put all the logic, all the elements of reusability. We can create a marketplace where people sell and buy containerized business function. So we are going toward the next gen of standardization for software-enabled capability. And that's what we really like here to emphasize. I mean, I try to put this slide. It's not comprehensive. It's just to kind of depict what the heck is a container or a business capability. Well, imagine this very portable palette where we tightly put capabilities in one standard form, and the capability minimally is an identity. What is the component doing, right? How can be discovered, how can be used, how can be deployed, how can be packaged, how can be shipped between the supply chain. And of course, he owns something, or the representation of something. If it's the loan origination microservice, he knows everything about loan origination. So we want to ask that microservices service how to go to, onboard the customer with certain profile. And the profile risk is again another microservice that understands risk profile for third party or for a customer. So we tie together now this capability in any kind of workflow among the containers, among the microservices. And what is interesting, if before we were doing centralized architecture where we have business processes that try to touch base on every other capability, tomorrow is going to be this spontaneous workflow between business capability. They know, they discover each other, they know who to ask to about what. So think about this spontaneous workflow concept, which is emerging architecture pattern as well. How we talk, or how these containers talk to each other on microservices, well, API has been everywhere these days. It's a standard way to use capability without owning a piece of somebody else's library. No, it's an interface. We know there is a specification, there is a manifest that describes what can I do for you as a microservice and what can you ask me, and also how can I interact with you. So that goes to a communication, so how this business function will communicate among themselves within their corporation and beyond the corporation boundary, because these workflows will and are already intra or intercompany workflows, meaning banks talking to other banks in the supply chain. So the trading floor talks to the, once the trade is made, it goes into the settlement or the other function that might be actually outsourced to another party, right? So I do maybe very well trading because I'm very good into trading, or maybe I don't want to do settlement. I just standardize the process and I give it to somebody else because I want to outsource the settlement phase. Once we are able to finally standardize the way we market, discover, communicate among the components, deploy, that becomes actually the very interesting opportunity. So no matter what, we're going to still run in our data center on the physical box, or maybe you want to work in our preferred virtualization layer, whatever it is. But also now, since I am now standardizing the way I describe myself as a business function, the platform has also standardized the way I can operate on the platform. I can also now start thinking about a private cloud and also a public cloud. That is the beauty of this new world. So traditional workload, client server, or even internet-based computing or cloud-native computing, it becomes a common denominator when we are standardizing packaging, runtimes, scale, monitoring, and security across footprints. That's where companies like Red Hat spend a lot of work. So if we have been happy running any software on any hardware, the operating system function, today we are enabling to run any type of software on any infrastructure, meaning private, public, virtual, or physical. How are we going to go to change our banks? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So the four paradigms, of course, while we want to optimize what we have already, try to reduce the cost in the data center, for example, by introducing virtualization as the next way, maybe containerization for higher scale. Just to give you some numbers, if you're able to run 20, 50 VMs per host, we can run 500 containerized workload in the same host. So now we have a 20 or 10 to 20 factor more. And actually, I was reading a document from a bank we're working with in the Middle East and saying, well, we're going to run these other 2,000 or 5,000 applications. I'm going to buy 10 servers. 10 servers. 5,000 applications. Why? Because they have reduced the footprint to make it so minimally needed in the containerized world that yes, they needed 10 servers more to run 5 applications more, which is really phenomenal. So while we're going to optimize on the data center on the hardware side, we also want to modernize on our processes. And so what are we trying to achieve here? There are 4 fundamental elements here. We definitely want to gain efficiency in the way we operate our platform. We want to improve productivity processes. It's all about shipping processes and services and offering to our customer faster. So a few numbers. Again, 18 months, 12, the average time to deliver for a new capability, or a patch, or an update to a service. So we have been seeing banks from minor banks to very large banks moving from 9-month delivery time to 3 times a week. This is being documented, publicized. You can read on the newspaper. And if you want to have references, call us. We have tons of information publicly available. It's real. 9 months, 3 times a week. I think it's phenomenal. It's a lot of work initially, but then it's the attitude. And the attitude is thinking continuously. Micro changes, forget microservices, right? Micro changes is going into the continuum. I was reading this report again from these banks, this project has no end. Why? Because it's a continued evolution. I love that statement. Think about that, right? How powerful is that? They state, I don't have a project beginning, a project end. It's just a journey. And we diligently make sure that the timing of the delivery is constant. 3 weeks. That is phenomenal. I think it's beautiful. This is the essence of continuous innovation. That's what we're going to, all together. So, back to open source. Can we help out on this journey with open source? And what is that for me, IT banker? What is that for me as customer? Well, open source, as Diane mentioned, and many other speakers and colleagues here, it's not about code only. It's much more. It's an attitude, right? It's the collaboration spirit. It's knowing there are much bigger problems than any single company ever can solve nowadays. And I give you some examples. You heard about blockchain. You heard about cloud-native computing. There's no one company that could have done it by itself. Not even one. So Red Hat is participating. You have other brands, other big names. That's the idea, right? Is working for the greater good together in a collaborative way. It's all about transparency, it's about debate, it's about patience, empathy, people, all the time. So open source has been and always is a source of innovation. And This diagram is interesting. It shows all the dimensions, and are not even enough. But it will never end to operate this diagram. Think about data analytics, the way that information is flowing in and out and traverses the organization is the essence of everything. Everything is open source, or is turning to be all open source. Mobility, management and automation, infrastructure as a service, Kubernetes, we heard. Kubernetes is one of the biggest projects ever across any company, and everybody's joining by the day. And they even tell you they are the leaders. That's another story. I like that. Competition is cool. So, open source definitely is a place where we want to be, if we want to talk about innovation, and we want to participate. That's why we're here. We saw this diagram already from Diane, from whoever was here the previous session. But I want to highlight one thing that I put kind of a bubble there, is the contribution concept. And I take this example because it happens to be one of the slides in my corporation. You can change name and project and distribution, but the concept is the same. There are tons of projects out there where we all contribute and work together. Then companies like Red Hat or many others derive the bits from the community and stabilize them too with the price consumption. There is a lot of work to be done. Diane mentioned before, it's not easy work at all. There's a lot of integration to be done. But what is interesting is that arrow back into the cloud, into the project cloud, is the contribution. Contribution is the essence. A company like Red Hat don't do any code change without prior going into the community to discuss again. Imagine that. I can't give you a piece of code because you want, even if you pay me a lot of money. I cannot. It's my choice. It's my religion. I go to the community, I'll discuss. Maybe in the community I am there with a lot of people, so it's easy to convince, right? That's the trick, right? You want to contribute more, it's a lot of work. But eventually, if the community likes it, we retake the update that we probably wrote, and we bring it back into the consumption of the enterprise in terms of software delivery package delivery, which is stable, which is secure, which is documented. People mentioned about documentation, very important, right? Open source is generally not documented, or is a little bit of a half the pager in the GitHub, whatever it is. We spend a lot of time by documenting a lot. And not only documentation, testing, quality, engineering, security, patching, there's a lot of stuff. That's what companies like Red Hat do. Spend a lot of time into securing the bits. And here is where we are. The same way that we build SAP storage, Linux operating system, can we build an open source piece of bank? This is maybe a question for you to go home and think, right? Can I do loan origination in an open source way? Can I manage the deposits, or maybe the interface to open banking standards in a way that a community will drive and probably will be able to deliver this in any bank because it's something that you just download somewhere. Know your customer is that my problem, your problem is everybody's problem. Know your customer and so risk. Third-party liability risk. Anti-money laundering is nobody's problem, it's everybody's problem. It makes so much sense to do it in an open source way. Of course, there are some IPs, and that's the right-hand side comment, the balance between intellectual property and open sourcing, but that's the choice. It's really up to us to decide, especially in banking, how much is the portion that is IP. The trading algo, of course, probably not going to give it to you, but the platform for trading, yes. So for every time, and don't get me wrong, this is not a list that is absolutely not inclusive of everything we need. It's just an example. This is probably 4,000 list long, if you take some architecture in financial services. But it's an idea here. This is a pattern, right? Can be payment made open source. Maybe the payment instruction that are being sent over the wire between your POS, the point of sales, and then the aggregator and the network and the issuer and the credit card company, maybe those cannot be tapped open sourcely, but maybe the protocol are open source. Because we understand that we need to, for example, bring new information element within the transaction from the end consumers to the banking issuer, because we can provide better value back to the consumer if we open the standard of which information goes from the point of sale transaction all the way down to the issuer and back to you as maybe as a loyalty. If I don't have this information because the protocol is not open, I will not be able to give you the better service.
So I'm going to comment, Bill Gates base is funding that switch already. So it's already there. It's existing. What you're talking about.
Yeah.
Gates is funding it now.
That's right. It's happening.
Yeah.
It's just not binary everywhere. It's a matter of adoption, right? Yeah. It's a wave. Right. And so going down to the concept of mutualization, that's the idea. I mean, lowering the common cost for everybody. Do we really need to rewrite compliance framework, auditing framework, logging? Describing financial object is actually a great project here at FINOS. It's obvious if I send an object that goes from the trading floor into the settlement, or maybe into my counterpart from buy side and sell side, if we agree on a way to represent things, point in time in the life cycle of a trade, it's actually very cool. We are doing a lot of work at FINOS in this. And also distributed application, generic term, meaning Uber workflows. I remember working with a chief architect at Deutsche where I used to work, and brilliant man. And he said, Alessandro, we can't solve the business problem or the workflow problem because we need the workflow of the workflows. Very cool idea. The workflow of the workflows is the problem. And maybe distributed application, blockchain kind of, it could be a way to re-architect everything. So again, what is the best place to discuss? Open source. Blockchain is open source. And of course, the more we go down into the technicalities, so from the business value to the customer, all the way down to the bits, open source plays already a relevant role, and companies like vendors like us have been demonstrating that we can definitely open source the underlying platform. Now, what we need to do as a community is to define the capability of such platforms, which are not unique for the industry, to make them compliant to the regulation that the industry needs to oblige. So that is the work we need to do. And here is maybe the vision. Maybe it's my vision, of course, it's our vision. Can we go toward an open source banking? I do believe that we can do part of it. It's a huge journey. It's probably $1 billion journey here. But it's obvious here that financial services, with the help of fintech, the partners, not anymore the contenders, because it's obvious there is a mutual relationship between the fintech and the financial service industry in terms of, who has the money to implement and to invest into, and who has the skills not to be highly regulated but still move very fast. This is the beautiful place where open source and fintech and FinServe converge into projects that we are running, for example, in this community. This is an amazing place. Fintech, FinServe, vendor, openly collaborating with common problem that we can mutualize for everybody's benefit. Now, while we're doing so, definitely we need to we need to have the right tool to do so, and we need to ask ourselves if such platforms or capabilities are in place to ensure that we do it safely way. We do support all the various developers, because it's all about developers at the end of the story. Everybody has their own language or preference. Can we automate everything? So I don't want to go through all the elements here. They're just ideas. But if you take a capability model and you dissect into what are the must-have, the wishful things to have, you will figure it out. You have your imperatives. Definitely security is one. We will never probably ban on security ever. It's way too much to lose. Maybe something else is happening more organically and on a journey. Automation, security, standardization, self-service are probably targets for every day in every company. And the journeys are across this dimension altogether. And again, going into this capability, there are some must-haves that we need to stand out firmly, and we need to have the customer and the vendors to really work very hard to solve the problem. And I can't list them all because everybody has their own priority, but definitely open source is great, it's fun, security is must. There's no way ever that we can allow to run the economy in an unsafe way. That's why bank has been spending billions of dollars and a lot of minds, brains to really secure the operation every day. Not counting how many cyber threats every bank, every day has been attacked. probably not even sharing them, by the millions per day. It's funny, I used to work for this shipping company, so I know a lot about this stuff. Shipping company. What is beautiful here, the standardization that we meant before. I mean, you guys know why this ship doesn't collapse, doesn't really sink. There is a lot of stuff going on here. Really. Containers are interlocked and latched into each other because of standardization. 20 and 40 interlock themselves. The heavy containers are stored below, and the lightweight containers of the happen to be repositioned are stored above. It is science. It's not by chance. The steep door planners are engineers, certified. They do every day balance the ship for port to port, for destination to destination, when they take cargo in for export food, or when they reposition containers to reposition the fleet all the way around the world. So this is where open source and standard play a very important role for normalizing and mutualizing the transportation industry. However, in the operation world, safety is guaranteed by employing this standard and putting into key operating procedure at scale. And I will end up here with my spiel. Just proud to say this is our motto, right? After that, we believe that open unlocks the world. Potential. What about you? Thank you. We have 10 minutes.
The kind of journey to the public cloud, private cloud virtualization mix is quite a long one. You got any advice or war stories about what to do while you're waiting to get there?
Together, right? So.
Well, like as a dev, I mean, you just kind of sit back and wait 6 months?
So I don't know if I completely understand the question. You're saying, I can go back to the slide, so maybe a bit more context here. Are you referring to the line that connects them?
No, so it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah.
And as a developer, have you got any kind of comments about what to do while you're waiting to get to that point?
Okay, I like this question. First of all, do I need to repeat? So how long does it take to take advantage of the opportunity to use a hybrid multi-cloud environment? And I like that you mentioned developer because they are the persona involved in this journey. They are the technologists of the platform when they see innovation from moving to bare hardware into virtualization, but done already, done and done, right? And also going into how we get to the place where environments can be procured with a click, and then with a ticket that goes back to people again, that maybe 5 weeks later give you these damn servers, which you always forget something because you forgot a piece of database. No, after 5 weeks, it's the drama every day. Everybody has dealt with a project and you forgot the requirements. Too bad, it's another ticket 5 weeks later. That's the problem, right? So that's where is the evolution from the provisioning of the infrastructure to the developer. What I see the beauty is, if the developer now is no longer needed to think about the architectural requirements to run the code at scale, secure, deployable, but we are able to now take all this responsibility we were coding against by line of code, connect to this database, to the other also, because it goes down, I need to flip over, connect to this messaging system, and the backup channel is code. Code 1, code 2, line 3. What we are doing now, this is beautiful in the evolution of the architecture, more and more capability are now delegated to the infrastructure, to the framework, to the path, the platform as a service, for example. So I need to run how many units of deployment. It's not my problem anymore. As a developer, I don't need to think about this. Do we need to connect to 3 databases, the backup, the data center one, the other one? No. I'm an endpoint. I need to read some record. I need to write some record. You, platform, figure it out. if I need to have 10 databases underneath or 100, or they need to be distributed at scale, or if the transaction need to cross data center across the world in a synchronous way or in a non-synchronous way. That's the beauty, I think, in terms of evolution, is I can spec out everything as a piece of configuration. So configuration as code, meaning we can codify all this capability that before we needed to code them. That's what I think is the evolution in the development point of view. And of course, that requires to understand what you can use as a developer. Can you discover a service? Can you locate that? Can you abstract it out completely on the protocols, the way you communicate, you represent things? I think that there's been a lot of evolution. So you asked me how fast. I think that the companies that have embraced and they believe in needing to do this, they have built some places, some sandbox, and they allow people to experiment at the most. Going back to Google, does your company give you a day a week to do what really you would like to do? That is the key, right? It's again a style, and even management here has a lot of responsibility to allow you to play with this new architecture, with these toolkits. So back to your boss, right? Or you, because you need to be willing to step up. And I need that time to learn this new stuff. I must. There's no way. And you guess what? If I don't do here, I do elsewhere.
So one more question we need to convert.
Yep. Lunch, so lunch early or the last best?
You got quite a few business outcomes on your slide. Lending, KYC, AML, trading, wealth, payments. From your experience, could you share maybe an example of where you've seen the most advanced use of open source delivering one of these business outcomes?
All right, so what is missing here definitely is a mega initiative, is probably open banking. So the fact that open banking has also been driven by regulation, especially here in Europe, has been a big driver, but it's definitely understood by everybody. There is actually a differentiating factor first and a competitive advantage capability to web. So open banking is probably one of the things that I see more progress, just because we have to, because the regulators, because the government, and the European community. Second, because if you are doing so, you're opening your business model to use third-party and much bigger channels and distribution of your services. You're gonna compete. You're gonna really actually win. I'll do. So interesting enough, the various regions are now catching up and even implementing, even leapfrogging, and even the regulator themselves, they're starting to, to see that this is becoming a competitive advantage. So open banking definitely is one. I would say even risk. Even ourselves, we have documented price and risk analytics in open source way. We spend a lot of money. Our company spent $300–400 million to run risk. We know that. I can mention the company, and maybe some of you here in this room that you know what I'm talking about is 100,000 cores per bank running risk and analytics and just crunching numbers. Can we do with open source platform? Can we do with open source architecture? I do believe so. I do. We need to re-architect.
But like in terms of a real-life end-to-end example, which is live in production now, you think it's still like evolving?
Eric, do we have an example we can disclose?
No, it's early days. There are core open source core banking platforms. Insurance is also opening up their core policy and claims. I don't want to give the name of the company away, but it's still a bit early days. But I think the fintech communities are doing open by default when it comes to their new propositions, and that's changing the landscape as well. So it's early days, it's new. I think Alessandro is right. The first step is accessing through open banking the banking services underneath it. We do believe that over time that will transition into open source banking. Effectively, even the banking infrastructure itself will be based on open source. Not the data, but the fundamental software.
So go back to the...
So there are pockets of implementation, different stages, different sizes. But it's a great question, actually. We should get more prepared on this.
Going back to the Gates Foundation one, so Bill Gates has been funding a product called Modulink.io, which is a payment switch. The reason to push it right back down to the lowest costs to enable financial inclusion. That product, I've got to be sensitive because we're going live in a few weeks, but we're about to go live in Africa. So there are projects, and there are more and more. Gates has gone even further, and before we had the diagram, community and enterprise. No, it all stays community. There is no enterprise edition by mandate. So there are different projects doing different things, and there are other services that are building on top of that called banking platforms, but they're all in different levels of maturity, and they're driven by individuals rather than necessarily the community. That's the change that really needs to come from banking and everything else. Community drives it, and everybody gets what they need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro.
Thank you very much. I love open banking for underbanked region. I think it's a mission that we should really put some time. That's phenomenal. Thank you.
We're going to thank you.